Story: The Black Dahlia. Market sign at Meta. Pause. Sex. 2.5. The last thing you do is turn in your gun and your shield. The paperwork is already filed. The goodbyes already mumbled over stale cake in the break room. But the ghosts? You have to evict the ghosts from your desk yourself. And for me, on my last day with the LAPD, there was only one that mattered. Her name was Elizabeth Short, but the world knew her as the Black Dahlia. The file was a monster, a cardboard tombstone sagging under the weight of 70 years of failure. Its corners were soft as old leather, the label typed on a machine that's probably in a museum now. I'd inherited it unofficially, the way old detectives pass down their obsessions. It wasn't a case anymore. It was a scripture, the founding myth of modern LA crime. I opened it one last time, the dry paper crackling under the fluorescent hum of the robbery homicide division. The first photo was the one that always stopped your breath. Lamert Park, January 15th, 1947. Betty Bersinger and her 3-year-old daughter thought they'd found a discarded department store mannequin in the overgrown lot. The truth was infinitely worse. Even after 30 years of seeing the worst things people can do to each other, the crime scene photos of Elizabeth Short are a gut punch. She wasn't just killed, she was curated, bisected with a horrifying precision, right between the second and third lumbar vertebrae. A hemicorporectomy. I had to look up the word my first time through the file. It's a procedure so rare, most surgeons never even attempt it. Her body had been drained of every last drop of blood, scrubbed clean, and left to be found. The killer had arranged her, posing her arms over her head, her legs spread, and her face. He'd taken a knife and carved a smile from the edges of her lips to her earlobes, a Glasgow smile. A permanent rictus grin that mocked the very idea of humanity. It was an exhibition, a statement, a masterpiece of pure, unadulterated hate. The city went insane. This was post-war Los Angeles, a place high on its own sunshine and swagger, believing it had left the darkness of the Depression and the war behind. The Dahlia murder was a mirror held up to its face, revealing the grinning skull beneath the suntan. The press, led by William Randolph Hearst's Examiner, turned it into a feeding frenzy. They invented the nickname, the Black Dahlia, a noirish fantasy that stuck. It was a reference to the movie The Blue Dahlia playing at the time, and Elizabeth's supposed preference for black clothing. They sold papers by the truckload, painting her as a mysterious femme fatale, a B-movie vamp who lured men to their doom. The truth, as it always is, was sadder and more mundane. I flipped through the witness statements, the letters, the sad little collection of her effects. Elizabeth Short was just a girl, 22 years old, pretty in a fragile way, with bad teeth and a cough that never quite went away. She wasn't a Hollywood starlet, she was a professional drifter, floating on the currents of other people's charity. She came to LA like a million others, chasing a flicker of fame that was never there. She worked as a waitress, lived in crowded apartments, and dated a long, blurry line of men. Servicemen, small-time hustlers, married businessmen. She was looking for a meal, a roof, an angle. Her beauty was her only real currency, and in a city built on celluloid and sin, that made her vulnerable. She wasn't a predator, she was prey. And she'd wandered into the biggest hunting ground on Earth. The investigation was a circus from day one. The crime scene was trampled by a legion of reporters and looky-loos before it was properly secured. Evidence was compromised, leads were contaminated. The LAPD, a department already swimming in corruption, was completely out of its depth. They were looking for a random maniac, a hobo with a knife. But this wasn't random. The precision of the bisection, the theatrical posing of the body. This was the work of someone with knowledge, medical knowledge, and then the killer started playing with them. About a week after the murder, the editor of the Examiner received a package. Inside was a collection of Elizabeth Short's belongings, her birth certificate, social security card, some old photographs. There was also an address book with one page torn out. The message was clear. I have things you don't. I'm in control. The sender had used cutout letters from movie ads to form the address, a final cinematic flourish. He even cleaned the items with gasoline to wipe any fingerprints. He was smart, he was careful, and he was taunting them. For decades, the file just got thicker. The list of suspects was a who's who of LA's underbelly. Mark Hansen, a wealthy theater owner who had let Elizabeth stay at his home and whose address book she was carrying. Joseph A. Dumais, a soldier who confessed and was almost charged before his story fell apart. Woody Guthrie, the folk singer, was even a person of interest for a while after sending obscene letters to one of Short's acquaintances. It was a maze with no exit. I skipped ahead, past the dead ends and the false prophets, to the section that always fascinated me the most, the part that felt cold and hard and terribly, plausibly true. It started not in 1947, but decades later, with a man looking into his own father's darkness. Dr. George Hodel. The name should have been at the top of the list from the beginning. Hodel was a physician, a specialist in venereal diseases who ran a clinic downtown. He was brilliant, a certified genius with an IQ of 186. He was also a man of secrets. He moved in avant-garde art circles, friends with the surrealist Man Ray. His home, the iconic Soden House in Hollywood, a Mayan-inspired temple of concrete blocks, was the site of decadent, drug-fueled orgies. He had the surgical skills, he had the intellect, and he had a core of profound cruelty. His own daughter Tamar accused him of incest. He was tried and acquitted, but the stink never washed off. His own son, Steve Hodel, would grow up to become an LAPD homicide detective. And it was Steve who, after retiring, stumbled upon a photograph in his late father's belongings. A picture of a dark-haired woman who bore a startling resemblance to Elizabeth Short. That's when Steve opened Pandora's box. He dedicated his life to proving his father was the Dahlia killer. And the case he built is terrifying. He uncovered transcripts from 1950, when the DA's office had bugged the Hodel house during the incest investigation. On the tapes, the doctor is heard talking to an unknown associate. "Supposin' I did kill the Black Dahlia," George Hodel says. "They couldn't prove it now. They can't talk to my secretary anymore, because she's dead." He later mentions making a mistake and that police might have been onto him. It was a bombshell buried in the archives. Why wasn't he charged? The answer is pure LA noir. Hodel was connected. He ran the top VD clinic in the city, and his patient list was full of cops, politicians, and studio heads. He knew where all the bodies were buried, literally and figuratively. He was part of the city's rotten infrastructure. Prosecuting him would have brought the whole house of cards down. So they let him go. A few years after the bugging, Hodel abruptly left his family, his practice, and his country, moving to Asia, where he lived for the next 40 years. He ran. I stared at the black and white photo of Hodel. The intelligent eyes, the smug, thin-lipped smile. It fit. The surrealist art connection explained the grotesque, artistic posing of the body. A living tableau inspired by his friend Man Ray's work. The medical knowledge explained the clean bisection. The psychopathy explained the pure, remorseless evil of the act. Steve Hodel even brought cadaver dogs to the Soden House basement decades later, and they alerted to the scent of human remains. Is it proof? Not in a court of law, it's circumstantial. But in the court of my gut, after 30 years of looking at killers, it feels right. George Hodel was a monster hiding in plain sight, protected by the very city he'd scarred. I closed the file. The click of the cardboard echoed in the quiet room. The story didn't end with an arrest or a conviction. It ended with a powerful man dying of old age in a San Francisco high-rise, having gotten away with it all. The Black Dahlia case was never solved because it couldn't be. The killer wasn't just one man, brilliant and sadistic as he may have been. The killer was the city. It was the Hollywood that promised Elizabeth Short stardom and gave her a bus ticket to nowhere. It was the press that devoured her memory for profit. It was the corrupt system that protected one of its own, even a monster like Hodel. Elizabeth Short's murder isn't a mystery. It's a parable. It's the story of a girl who came looking for the light and found an abyss. Her ghost doesn't just haunt Leimert Park. It haunts every casting couch, every broken promise, every desperate soul who comes to this city with stars in their eyes. She is LA's original sin, a wound that never scarred over. I pushed the file into the metal return slot. It landed with a dull, final thud. My ghost was evicted. I stood up, put on my coat, and walked out of Parker Center for the last time. The LA night was cool, the skies starless, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to look over my shoulder for a girl with a flower in her hair and a smile cut ear to ear. The city could keep her now. It always had.